5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition. Strap in.
And now, for the next 24 hours, live from a lockdown room in Leeswood, comes the Andy Snowden Radio Show in aid of the NHS Charities Together appeal. Please welcome the man voted best suited to wear a mask. It's Andy Snowden!
105 FM.
Fabulous. Right, okay. Now then, Tony-nominated and Drama Desk Award-winning writer of music for film and television, theatre and dance for the last 16 years is Mr. Grant Aldin. Brought up in Kent, Grant had his first taste of life in film and theatre aged just 7 when he was cast in the Jim Henson movie The Dark Crystal, and in the same year appeared at the National Theatre in Danton's Death. He continued acting, playing many leading roles in the West End in Peter Pan, Oliver, March of the Falsettos and Hamlet at the National Theatre with Judi Dench and Daniel Day-Lewis. And leaving school at 16, he performed in the original West End production of Stephen Sondheim's Into the Woods, and from there went on to the Central School of Speech and Drama to study acting, and then pretty much did not look back. A couple of weeks ago, I got my first taste of Grant Aldin's amazing work when I caught the One Man Two Governors that was streamed by the National Theatre in the National Theatre at Home season that's on YouTube at the moment. The smash hit comedy starring James Corden, which ran for over 3 years in the West End on Broadway and played 2 international tours.
You knows what away.
Grant led the onstage band The Craze, performing the songs for the first 2 years of the show. These songs can still be heard in productions all over the world. Grant Aldin, one of the most talented blokes I think I've ever spoken to be honest with you. Here he is on the 24-hour marathon show here on Calon FM. Mr. Grant Aldin, sit back, put the kettle on, enjoy this. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks ever so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. So I'll start by asking you how it's all going. Are you surviving? Are you coping with this situation we find ourselves in?
Yeah, it's quite odd, isn't it? I mean, I'm really in the middle of nowhere, just on the Welsh border, on the edge of the Black Mountains. So I'm up a track at the edge of nowhere. So for me, it's quite weird because life looks pretty much the same. There's just the sheep around me, and I don't really see anyone anyway. I'm up here on my own, so it hasn't really changed. The difficult thing is just this kind of pervading air of doom, which is difficult to ignore. So I'm still working at the moment. I still have to think that the jobs I'm working on are going ahead, or maybe they'll be postponed.
Yeah.
But I've still got to kind of carry on with them because otherwise I'll be in trouble if they do go ahead.
Yeah.
But it's quite difficult to continue doing that when all around you there's this kind of terrible news. It's quite a weird. So I found it quite weird mentally, but in kind of day to day, not really that much different up here.
Yeah.
And of course, all my friends who are musicians and actors and directors and what have you.
Yeah.
All the work has just completely stopped. And for me, as someone who primarily is my job is composing, writing. So for me, any distraction. I'll take any distraction you want to throw at me, rather than do the work and sit down and do the difficult thing of writing.
Yeah.
So this is like an almighty distraction that is very, very difficult to ignore.
I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. But I was going to ask you actually, because I mean, I usually ask people if performing and acting was always on their radar as a kid. But your career quite literally started as a child actor, weren't you?
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing it since I was about 3, actually. If I think about it, I mean, like going to dancing lessons and modelling and all that kind of stuff when I was literally from 3 years old. And then at 7, I was in a film called The Dark Crystal, Jim Henson film.
Yeah.
And that same year, I was in a play at the National Theatre at Danton's Death. So the age of 7 was like a really big year for me, like starting work. And then I continued to work as an actor right through my childhood. I went to stage school and all of that. And up to I was about 15, I suppose. If you'd have asked me what I wanted to do, I'd have said I want to be an all-rounder.
Yeah.
And a song and dance man who, acts a bit, sings a bit, dances a bit.
Uh-huh.
And that's what I was doing, and I was, in musicals and all that kind of stuff. And then I did another play at the National when I was 14, 15, which was the Hamlet with Judi Dench and Daniel Day-Lewis, kind of big, infamous production, because Daniel Day-Lewis got ill right near the end of his contract and, walked off stage famously. He said he thought he saw his father on stage with him. So that was a massive production that we took all around the world, and I did for kind of 9 months. And that stopped me wanting to be a kind of song and dance man and made me want to be an actor.
Yeah.
And I went on from there and trained as an actor at Central School of Speech and Drama, and left and kind of acted for a few years. But always at the same time, there was in the background me writing songs and writing music and being in bands and trying to get publishing and all that kind of stuff. And at a certain point, that just became more interesting to me than the kind of acting work that I was getting.
Uh-huh.
So I stopped the acting and started focusing on writing music.
But the amount of work that you'd done, I mean, your career, many actors would have killed for by the time you actually decided to go to drama school. Was drama school, was it necessary? Was it something that you thought you needed to do, or was it something that you really wanted to do?
Well, I think that job at the National Hamlet when I was 15 was really, really important to me, and the people on that job became absolute mentors and heroes of mine. And Richard Eyre, who was the director of the National Theatre at the time, directed that production. And he told me to go to drama school. He said that's the best thing you can do.
Uh-huh.
And Judi Dench as well said it as well. And so I was like, oh, this is definitely what you do. And I was living at home, and I left school at 16 and went into a West End musical for 6 months, Into the Woods, the original West End production of Sondheim's Into the Woods.
Brilliant.
I was just kind of understudying it. And I was mainly sitting in the dressing room, and then occasionally I'd go on for Jack. And I finished that, and I'd always been like constantly working as a kid. And I was living at home, and I maybe had like a month. I finished that work, and I had nothing. I had a couple of auditions, but I had no jobs. Like a few weeks, my mum was like, "You've got to go to drama school. This is no good. You can't just sit here not getting work." So I was kind of auditioning for drama school. I only auditioned for Central, and I went really early. Actually, I was only 17 when I went to Central, but I loved it. I really just kind of soaked it all up. And although I went to stage school before that, it wasn't a very kind of serious acting training. It was really more focused on song and dance.
Yeah.
And it wasn't so serious about acting. So I absolutely loved drama school and being with all those people that's the similar age to you and same sort of ambitions. And also because I hadn't gone to university and I hadn't even done A-levels, I was very young. I just kind of opened myself up to it and didn't kind of question anything. Just took it all on board, soaked it all up, and had a really great time.
Yeah. Because I said to you the other day, didn't I, that, that you worked with my brother in Miss Saigon. But then when I read your biography, and like you while you were doing Saigon, you actually wrote a musical, is that right?
Yeah, so what happened was in Miss Saigon, I was just kind of one of the GIs, one of the guys in the chorus. So I had a lot of time where I wasn't really doing anything. And I suppose I was in it for 2 contracts, 18 months or something like that. And bubbling away in this background was this idea that I'd want to write music. And I didn't quite know how to go about it. I thought maybe I would give up acting and try and get publishing. And in fact, that did it nearly happened. I had some songs, like country and western songs, published in Nashville, which is very weird. And some other songs published in Glasgow and stuff. But whilst I was in Miss Saigon, I started writing a musical with my dresser, Nick Barnes, who's a very clever man, kind of polymath, another kind of child actor, actually. And at that point, he was also running an actor's agency, so he could kind of do lots of different stuff. And I'd always wanted to write a musical, but I'd never found anyone to collaborate with. And doing it myself was just too difficult. Was just too much, too many decisions to make. And Nick, was a really good person to just work with and bounce ideas off with. So we got to work on this musical, and through my time in Miss Saigon, we wrote it. I mean, it wasn't very good. It really wasn't very good, and it was completely unproducible.
Right.
But when I finished Saigon, I was like, that's it, no more acting, and we sent this musical around everywhere we thought was a great fit, which were National, Royal Court, Donmar Warehouse, all these kind of little, like the Cottesloe stuff, kind of small theatres, but really posh. And of course, no one was even slightly interested. And months went by, we didn't hear anything. And then I think Nick went to see something at the Bridewell Theatre, which was a theatre that I didn't know at that point. And he phoned me up the next day and said, "Oh God, I can't believe I hadn't thought of the Bridewell before, but this is the perfect place for this musical. Let's send it to them." And at that point, the Bridewell, which was a theatre company, it's not a theatre company anymore, it's just a venue, but at that time it was the Bridewell Theatre Company, and they were kind of well known for being an international centre of excellence for new musical theatre, in particular American musical theatre. They put on a lot of stuff, and they just knew a lot about new musical theatre when no one else was really interested. And they had a great couple of people leading the company, Clive Paget, Carol Metcalf. And we sent this thing off to them, this musical, and we heard back from Clive, and he said, "Come in and have a chat." And we went in, and sure enough, it was the perfect venue for it. And he sat us down and said, "Look, I don't think we can put this on." But he wasn't scared of it. It was a really difficult piece, and he wasn't scared of it. He wanted to find out how we worked, and he wanted to have us rewrite a section of it to see how we would work under pressure and see how we could rewrite.
Uh-huh.
So he gave us kind of space to do a workshop, which we did, and then we had a couple of days with him as a kind of dramaturg, director, looking at a section of the show and rewriting it. And that's my first experience of that, was fascinating. And that led to him asking me to write my first kind of songs to order, which was for a lunchtime production. I used to do lunchtime productions there. And there was this play called All in the Timing, and he wanted 3 songs for in between each scene, and asked me to write them and actually to be in it as well. I ended up being in the show. So I did that, and then that led to him asking me to be the resident composer at the Bridewell. And he applied for some money from a few places. We cobbled together a little bit of money, and I worked there as a resident composer for kind of 18 months. It meant that I was scoring plays, and I wrote 3 musicals for them there, and just had access to a piano and a room and the creative team there to offer advice and support. And that was my kind of training ground, because I didn't train as a musician or as a composer at all. That year and a half I taught myself to read and write music.
What?
So that was kind of how I started. And the strange thing is that having done so much theatre, like as a kid, it had never occurred to me that theatres plays needed music. It just hadn't occurred to me that was a kind of career path. I understood that films and TV would need music, but I had no clue as to how to get into that kind of stuff. And I understood musicals, but I ended up then writing a lot of music for plays through that kind of apprenticeship at the Bridewell Theatre.
On the bright light, on the help her start to drool as she guzzles up the fuel.
Which leads us brilliantly, I think, onto I've got to ask you about One Man, Two Governors at the National, which I mean, I was only introduced to it the other day. I knew the play existed and I knew it was a massive hit, but I'd never seen it. And I saw it because of this lockdown, and the National's been playing their productions out on YouTube, and I've got to tell you, it's one of the best things I have seen in many a year. It's absolutely awesome. You wrote all the music for it, which... So tell us about that, because you had the band The Craze. Were they your band, or was it something that you put together?
What happened was, it was I'd worked with Nick Heitner, the director there. Maybe, I think that was my 4th play with him. Actually, I now work with him an awful lot. I think I'm up to my 13th or 14th play with him. But in that time, I'd started doing music for some of his plays, and every time we'd get to tech, I'd play him a musical that I'd written. Just on day 3 of tech, you've got 10 minutes spare, I just fling a CD his way and say, "Oh, have a listen to this that I wrote." So he knew that I could write songs. And in fact, he commissioned a musical from me. I worked on this thing for a good long time. It was just me writing all of it. I found it really, really difficult because it was just too much pressure just for me. It was an original story. I was writing scripts, lyrics, music, everything. It was quite a difficult thing to do. I got to the point where I kind of finished the first half, and we played him it, and he said, "Oh, I don't think it's right. Actually, I don't think it's right for the theatre I thought it was right for. I've changed my mind on what I think that theatre needs to put on now, and how we need to challenge the audience." But as a kind of, I know it's no consolation, but there's this play, One Man, Two Governors. Do you want to write the music for it? And I was like, of course I do. And it was Richard Bean who wrote the play, and I'd worked with Richard before, Richard and Nick, on a play called England People Very Nice, which I had again written probably about 12 songs for at the National Theatre, but I hadn't written any of those lyrics. That was Richard's lyrics, and then Nick Heitner did a big rewrite on the lyrics, but I didn't contribute to that. So we talked about One Man, Two Governors, and he said to me, think of it like a carry-on film, but kind of scored by the Beatles. I don't even think at that stage Skiffle was a part of it. It was kind of Beatlesy, carry-on, end of the pier.
Yeah.
And he mentioned variety acts. He mentioned the Beverly Sisters. He showed me a video of a very fat man playing the xylophone, which was on YouTube, which was hilarious, and like a woman tap dancing on point whilst playing a banjo and stuff.
Right.
I was like, how on earth do you make all this into one show? To me, it was a bizarre idea that you could have all these really different things and make them one thing. So we had a few weeks before we started rehearsals, and I just wrote a couple of songs and sent them to Nick, because at this stage I don't think there were going to be any songs in One Man, Two Governors. And I sent them to Nick and said, what do you think? We could do something like this. And he just loved the songs, and he said, just keep writing these songs, these skiffle songs.
Yeah.
Which had become, by this point, we'd done a little workshop, and it had kind of become a part of the plot that James Corden's character, Francis, would be an ex-washboard player in the skiffle band. So he said, just go to town and write all these songs in the kind of style of skiffle and beat music, and then it'll be like, we found all these great songs in a trunk somewhere that belonged to this band, this fictional band, that just happened to fit our show and our themes of our show perfectly.
Give me one, give me two, give me three, give me three dinners on four. My old man was a lonely soul, he worked to everyone's day.
So we did that, and I said to him, I feel like I might want to be the musical director on the show as well, because it feels like quite a fun one. And I'd like to play it, I'd like to be involved, and he was very happy with that. So then I went about putting the band together, the Craze, and I just got some friends that I'd known I was living in Rochester in Kent at the time, and all of those three other boys in the Craze all come from Rochester in Kent. And I'd worked with them all before, and they were all very young. I mean, the bass player was only 21 at the time, and I'd known him since he was 16. I'd known the guitarist since he was about 20, and same with the drummer as well. And I've worked with them all in musical theatre pit bands, actually, not as on-stage bands or rock bands or anything like that. They're all very much pit players, and they still are. They're all playing in West End bands. So I put together this band, and on about week 2, week 3 of rehearsals, we'd been rehearsing in another room. And I said to Nick Heitner, who's going to sing? We've got to decide at some point who's going to sing these songs, because we don't really know. We don't know how they're going to work. And at that point, he said, well, I think you've got to sing them. So then it became that I was fronting the band, as well as writing all the songs and playing 10 different instruments in it and all of this kind of stuff. And what you didn't see on YouTube was that we played an opening set as well of about 5 songs before the show started. So as the audience came in, we were playing these original songs to kind of set the tone and set the theme.
Yeah.
And that was it. I stayed with the show for, I guess, 18 months, 2 years. We did it at the National. We did a little 6-week tour. We did 3 months, sold out at the Adelphi. Then we moved it to the Haymarket. I continued at the Haymarket for about a year. We took it to Broadway. I didn't do it on Broadway, but I auditioned the band for a week over there, and then worked with them for a month, putting them into the show. And then I continued to be involved, casting the band and occasionally dapping and going on. So it was a big part of my life for 4 or so years.
But what I found amazing about those songs, because usually when you hear original songs, it takes you a few times to listen to something, and then you start to think, oh, I quite like it. It's a bit of a grower or something. But your songs in One Man, Two Governors, they were instantly. There was an instant hook there. So did you have many songs that you sort of had to leave out because they weren't like that?
No, actually, there was only one song that I ditched. And wrote another one for, and it was because I just didn't think the joke of it was strong enough.
Uh-huh.
But the rest of them, no, all the songs I wrote are in there. There was no spare ones, and I was given complete free rein to write about any subject that was kind of vaguely to do with the show. So it was an amazing assignment. And certainly one of the things was we wanted them all to be very hooky, and we wanted people to go out thinking, I remember that song. Oh no, do I remember it or not?
Yeah.
You know, like nearly like they'd heard it before. You know, so very, very catchy. And they're very, very short songs as well. In fact, that version of NT Live that was on YouTube is the longest that the show ever was, because that was at the last week of the NT run at the Littleton. And then we went on tour, then we took it to Adelphi, and by that point we chopped 3/4 of an hour out of the show. And by the time it was running on Broadway, it was super fast. And we managed I think we lost one verse from one song. I had to rewrite just to try and, you know, zip it along a bit quicker. But yeah, no, it was an awful lot of fun. Also, the easiest job I've ever had to do. It was so, you know, it's just like little pop songs with stories, which were really fun to write.
Yeah.
I wrote them all in the room whilst everyone was rehearsing. I was just kind of sat in the corner writing these songs, because everyone, it was such a fun room to be in, everyone rehearsing, and it was such a funny play that I just decided it was more fun for me to be in there rather than in the studio at home.
But what I found really, you know, as a performer, you think, well, what's gone on here then? Because when James Corden plays what looks like a xylophone, but it's called a marimba, isn't it? Marimba or something?
It's a xylophone, actually, yeah.
Right. And Oliver Chris as well playing the car horns.
Yeah,
Both brilliantly. Could they play those things before, or did they have to learn them?
No, we had to teach all of that.
Wow.
Yeah. And I got very good at teaching that. It's called a horncestra.
Right.
Yeah, the car horns.
The car horns, yeah.
Yeah, they're really expensive as well, those car horns.
Right.
Because now obviously the show runs all around the world in different productions, and they all use my music. So we've had to kind of, you know, tell people where they could get the car horns from, and if people can't afford to use the car horns, we've had to provide a kind of alternative.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, all of that stuff we had to teach. The Dan Rigby playing Alan Dangle with his chest slapping percussion was something that's pure Daniel Rigby. I mean, he came up with that. We didn't know, you know, what to do. We knew at that point. I think at that point, has James done his? Yeah, James has already done the xylophone solo. So at that point, they've kind of stepped up. The songs have stepped up to being a bit more funny and a bit more out there.
Yeah.
And so we needed something in this song to make it funnier. And we had Harry Dangle playing his ukulele, Martin Ellis, but he's a really great ukulele player, but it wasn't very funny. So I think Calon Crystal, who was the comedy director on the show, said, let's get Daniel Rigby involved in it. He'll think of something. And I think I'd said to him, because he was supposed to be a serious actor, maybe there's a kind of Brazilian body percussion idea.
Yeah.
That you can take it really seriously, and it's something silly. And he came back just one day, just undid his shirt, started slapping his chest really, really hard. He said if he couldn't see hand marks on his chest by the end of that solo, then it wasn't funny. So yeah, that was pure him. But I had to kind of transcribe that solo and teach it to everyone that played it afterwards. Was
it a written drum solo on his chest?
He did the same thing every night. So
oh wow!
Just had to kind of learn what he did and then, you know, teach it to everyone else that came after him.
But it very much looked like the sort of show where you just couldn't tell what was going to happen next. So when something like that happened, it was a surprise, but not that much of a surprise in the end.
Yeah. I mean, the show was full of stuff that you weren't expecting to happen.
Yeah.
Although I have to say that I was sat, because the band were positioned in the audience for all of the run at the National, all of the tour, and all of the Adelphi, and all of the international tours that followed. Everything, the band were in the audience watching the show. We were at the Haymarket for about 3 years, and at that stage we were in a pit, which I didn't really enjoy very much. It was much more fun being kind of on all the time and watching the action. And so I've seen the show hundreds and hundreds of times, and there's not an awful lot that changes. It looks like complete chaos, but it's very, very well designed. And the few bits that are loose, where there are ad-libs, are always a joy, you know, and you look forward to moments every show, because, you know, when the two guys get up with a trunk,
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of that James would do every show, you know, definitely. But you could never bank on what the people were going to say when they came up, or how they were going to react, or...
Yeah.
So that always kept it very, very lively.
But I was watching a sort of a reunion thing on YouTube the other day with Nick Heitner and Richard Bean, James Corden, Jemima Rooper as well, and Oliver Chris, and it very much it became apparent to me that it wasn't just another show for everybody. It wasn't just another gig. It was literally a life changer.
Yeah, it really was, and for me as well. You know, it's definitely the thing I'm remembered for at this stage, and I have no problems with that at all. You know, that's fine by me. It was such fun to be involved in it. It took me to have a show on Broadway. You know, I won some awards and was nominated for a Tony and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So and met some incredible people, and I've worked with Nick Heitner loads since. I've worked with Richard Bean lots and lots since as well, and Oliver Chris, and worked with James since, and got to know James and all that kind of stuff. So it really was you really had the sense that you were part of something very, very special. And it's not often that happens. Sometimes you get a show where, I can remember shows where I've been involved in, and you've enjoyed it, and you think it's amazing.
Yeah.
And then the audience don't really get it. Or the audience love it, and we love it, but the critics don't really get it. But there was just something about that show where everyone, and maybe it was to do with the timing of it, you know, when I can't remember when it came, it was 2011 it came out, but maybe we just needed that kind of positivity at that point. But it was just such a silly, joyful show to do.
Yeah.
It required so much energy from everyone. I mean, especially James. He absolutely exhausted himself doing it. But he would never, ever took a show off. I mean, he literally never took a show off. And he was doing the show with injured knees, he detached retina, injections, steroids into his vocal folds, all sorts of stuff. He would just never give, you know, less than 100%. It was amazing.
And it's funny as well, because every now and again, especially as an audience member, you know, sometimes you see something and my initial response when it first started, and I thought, what is this? This wasn't what I expected it to be at all. And then I saw an interview with Nick Heitner when it went on to Broadway. And he said literally that, the amount of people, they watch the first 10 minutes and just go, what is this? And it just turns out to be...
Even in the press after they showed this YouTube, the NT live stream on YouTube, I think Andrew Neil tweeted afterwards, well, I watched the first 15 minutes of One Man, Two Governors and turned it off. No idea what all the fuss is about. But yeah, that's very true. We've always known that the first scene is a really difficult one. It's very strange. It's odd. It's strange performances. You've got this very flat set. You know, there's a lot of plot to set up in this opening scene. I mean, that was also a very long version, as I say, that was on the NT Live. We did manage to get it much quicker than that, which is better. But still, it wasn't really until the second scene, and when you get James on his own with the audience, that you start to relax into it and we start to see what it is. But then by the end of the first half, you know, I don't think there's been a funnier scene than that end of the first half scene with Tom Edden playing Alfie the waiter.
Yeah. Incredible. In fact, that was one of I'll let you go in a minute, but I find it so interesting that he actually wrote something on YouTube, and he said, I've never been more proud than to play the waiter in the third scene or something. And I thought, and I hadn't seen the play at that point, and I thought, what, he's only in one scene, is that right? And then when I saw it, and I thought, my God, he steals the show.
Yeah, but what a scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, that's another thing. After we went on tour, Richard Bean wrote some extra scenes for Alfie.
Right.
Which aren't in that NT Live version. So he does come back later on he would come back in the second half, and he'd have a couple of scenes there as well, because he was just such a hit with audiences.
Yeah.
It was just like, it's obvious we've got to bring him back. You know, you can't not have him in the second half. So Alfie got a bit more to do in the second half, but I don't think anything tops that dinner scene at the end of the first half. It's just genius.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Grant, it's been an absolute treat to speak to you this afternoon, mate. Thanks ever so much for that. I really appreciate it. And you look after yourself in this lockdown. Yeah, it sounds to me like you're in a really nice place to be locked down.
Yeah, it's lovely, and of course the weather's been so beautiful. You know, I can go for my daily walk straight up into the mountains from here and not have to get on a road and not see anyone and all of that. So, no, self-isolation is a lifestyle choice out here. So that's not a problem for me at the moment.
Right. Well, you look after yourself, pal, and look forward to whatever you do next.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers, buddy. Take care of yourself.
Cheers, mate. Bye.
Bye.
So there you go, Mr. Grant Alden. What a guy, what a man. Flippin' heck, there's a talent for you. Sort of fellow that makes you feel really inadequate about yourself, do you know what I mean? So thanks ever so much to him. This music, incidentally, is all from the brilliant one-man, two governors that was with James Corden at the National Theatre. He wrote it all and performed it as well. It's brilliant. Cheers to him. You are listening to the 24-hour marathon show with me, Andy Snowden, here all day today until 7 a.m. this morning. Hang on a minute, I'll tell you it again. I was here at 7 o'clock this morning. I shall be leaving at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. You know how 24 hours works, right? And it is all in aid of the NHS. And if you can throw a few quid their way, this is how you can do it this afternoon.
To donate to the NHS, go to www.calonfm.com and click on the 24-hour marathon show link. Please give what you can. Stay at home, save lives, protect the NHS.
Well, I was born an original sinner.